Hello viewers, today we'll be making this lightning effect in Unity. I have a weapon type in my game that does shock damage and will eventually paralyze an enemy, and then it puts this kind of aura on them so the players know that they're paralyzed. This is an effect based on one done by Minions Art, so I'll link her tutorial below. It's just that hers was a little outdated and used the older particle system and also had like resources that you couldn't access anymore, or at least I couldn't access, like shader code. This one doesn't have any shader code, it's just all in ShaderGraph and the new VFX Graph. So hopefully someone finds it useful. It's not too tough to follow, I hope. And yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to go do is go to photop.com, because I don't have Photoshop on this computer, and set a new canvas 512 by 256. We'll press Shift F5 and set the background to black and make a new layer. We'll also go to View, Pattern Preview, and then we can start drawing with this brush tool. And we're just going to make a little bolt shape, and you'll see that it kind of matches up, which is nice. And then if we zoom in, we can start kind of trying to clear up the edges, if that makes sense. So we'll just cut off a bit here and like a bit there, just trying to make it a bit more uniform, organic kind of thing. It doesn't have to be perfect. And once we're happy with it, we're just going to double click the layer, add a stroke. We're going to change it to shape burst, blend mode normal, position outside, blah blah blah. Go from black to grey, and that size seems okay. We actually want to turn off the view first, though, I just remembered, because otherwise you get that weird artifact on the left. So we're going to turn off pattern preview and then do that. Boom. And then we'll duplicate it, and this one will say inside instead of outside. And we'll change it from black to grey to white to grey. And make sure you have reverse clicked there. So you'll see now it's just a very thin line, eventually teetering out. So we'll save that as a PNG once we apply it. And the next step will be to go into Blender. So we'll create a new scene, press Shift A and make a UV sphere. We'll go into face mode and Alt Shift click there as well to select the edge loops, then Control I to invert, delete faces. And then we'll go 7 to get top view, delete, say, those faces there, and again, because obviously it didn't go through it. And then we're going to press A, R, and rotate on the x-axis. And we can actually make it exactly 90 here if we want. And we can press 3 just to see it from the side, press G to grab it and kind of orientate it a bit. And then we're going to grab one of these faces, and we're going to rotate it. We're going to rotate it with proportional editing on. So when we rotate it, you'll see it changes the contour of a few of them. So you can just like kind of tweak it a little bit. You can even just grab a piece or two, do that kind of thing. And once you've done that, you're just going to go into UVs, UV editing, press A, go down here, press A, and go UV, pack islands. I think this horizontal works. Yes, and then you can just press S and Y to scale up like that, and G and Y to make it sure it fits from top to bottom, or more or less, because obviously we're not going right to the edge. And then just save that and export it as a OBJ file. You don't need to set materials. You don't need to sync materials, so just export that to your project. Once you're back in your scene, I've just created a plane, so 3D object plane, and then a new shader graph like so, unlit shader graph, and we'll go work on this tutorial shader graph. But first, we'll create a material from this and just apply it to the plane, just so it's easy to work with. And you'll see our new shader here. So first things first, we want to add a material. So we'll get a texture 2D, we'll just call it main text, and we can default this main texture to the bolt. That's what I saved the thing we made in Photop from, that image. And then we'll just go sample texture 2D, and we'll drag that into the base color just to make sure it's all working. But of course, in this material, we also have to set the bolt here. Really don't need to do that. You could just have not bring it in there, but it's fine. And then we're going to go to the graph settings themselves. Unlit is fine. Set it to transparent. Blending mode alpha. We want to render to both faces just in case. And we want this to be usable in the VFX graph. So if we save that, you'll see now it works like so. And the only other thing we're going to do is actually set this to additive, because it's kind of like a bright lighting effect, and you'll see we have that there. So next we want to make it available to actually come in, so we want it to be like kind of a harsh contrast as opposed to just this flowy gradient. So what we're going to do is use a step, and we can use it from here. So if we put that into the in, and then we get another float, and we'll just call it strength. You'll see that we have a value from 0 to 1. I think it's around 0 to 3.1 or something. But you'll notice that it has kind of artifacts at the edge, which it shouldn't do because it's grayscale. So I'm not sure why that happens, but it's fine. If we just bring in the red channel, it works like so. And we want this to go from like 0.05 to 0.31. That's just the values I found for this particular texture. Obviously, it may change based on what you're doing. So we'll just leave it like that. And you'll see that as we go up, it kind of disappears away and then comes back. So that's looking okay. Next step is to add a bit of movement, a bit of offset. So we can do that with the time and a float for scroll speed. And we'll just set that to say 0.8 is usually a good value. We'll drag that out here and just multiply these together. And then we'll take this into a vector 2 because we only want to actually scroll the X, the Y we want to leave as is. And we'll put this into a tiling and offset node. And now you'll see that it scrolls like so. Nice. And we can bring this into the base color as well, just so we can see it working over here. And we can also grab another vector 2 here while we're at it. We'll get another float for tiling. Default that to 1, just so there is a tiling. Put that in X, and then put that in there. Just make sure this is obviously also set to 1. And now we can set the tiling of the material. So we can experiment with all these to kind of see what it looks like. See, that just makes it a bit flatter. Yeah, it's looking decent so far. Only other thing we need really is a color. So I'll add this and use the British spelling, God save the king, and we'll multiply this by the last value, like so. And that should be our texture done. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We'll default it to a nice deep blue, something like that. And we want to set it to RGB, HDR before I forget. And we'll set the alpha up even though it doesn't make a difference, and we'll set it to like maybe like a 4. So you'll see it's got a nice glow there. So that's the texture done. Next we're going to create a VFX graph. So we're going to go create visual effect, and that'll give us something like this, and you just press new. And I've made a new one that's just a simple loop, so you can choose some default specs, but it doesn't matter if you haven't got one thus far. We're going to be basically making from scratch anyway. So there's the effect. I'm also going to turn on my little skeleton just so you kind of get a sense of perspective, and then we'll get to work on it. So the first thing we're going to do is set the spawn type to both constant, just a low constant like 2, and also periodic burst, which will give it more of a lightning-like effect. Then we can get rid of things like gravity and linear drag. We don't need a lot of this stuff. Even the output isn't the correct kind. We need to output a mesh with the shader graph that we selected. So this is going to take in the shader graph we just made, the shock status shader, as well as the mesh we just made. So you'll see that it's now shooting out all these little things there, but we don't need that. We don't need set velocity. The arc shape can be fine like that. We just have to make sure the size is correct. So I'm going to set the radius to about, that seems okay, maybe about 0.3 instead of 0.03. So it's kind of surrounding him a little bit. And then the lifetime we're going to bring way down. And then in the output, we're going to make sure we orient it so it's all facing towards the center rather than just any which way. And we're going to do this by getting the current position from the attribute get position, and then we're just going to normalize it, which I'm not sure you have to do, but it's there. We'll feed that into the Y, I believe. And now you'll see it all kind of surrounds him and looks quite nice. Next, we're going to get the age over lifetime. So I'll just go from 0 to 1 based on how old the particle is, and we'll use that to sample a curve. Sample curve. And we want that going from our beginning value, which I think was 0.05 up to 0.31. 0.05, and if you close it and open it again, it does kind of normalize it, and we can just press auto, close, and bring that into the strength, and you'll see they kind of like pop and fizzle and spark, and it looks quite nice. Last thing we're going to do is add a little size over time. First we're going to set the original size, so 0.15 and 0.2, and then we'll do another size over life here, over life, and we'll multiply this instead of just setting it at 1, because obviously that's way too big. So instead of overwrite, we'll do multiply, and we'll go from say 1 to maybe 1.4. sounds reasonable, and we'll just set this both to auto once again, just so it's just flat, doesn't need to really have anything. And there we go. That's more or less the effect we've gone for. I think it looks quite good. Future Armin here with a few things that I forgot. When you're working on the effect, make sure everything is in local space. So just click over here to make sure it's not in world space. Same with stuff like this. Otherwise it'll orient incorrectly once you start moving the particle around. Also, don't be afraid to add any sort of attributes or properties that you might want to change, so they'll be different between the particles. Things like color or spawn rate. So I just have a little script here that allows me to change the spawn rate from the particle itself. Also, you can add whatever you want. Just experiment and have fun. So I have like instead of just having the color be constant over the lifetime, I have it go up and down, which kind of gives it a little flashing effect, which is kind of hard to see, but adds a little something, I think. Also, if you want to see it properly, I made a new demo scene here, so you can't tell, but that's because I don't have a volume in here. So make sure you go volume, global volume, and just create something with a bit of bloom. I have one here already, and make sure you turn it on in the camera as well, so it works correctly. Otherwise you won't actually see that HDR effect. Kind of just a little electrified dude there now, looking pretty nice. And yeah, it's been a while since I put out a tutorial. Hopefully this wasn't too rambly, wasn't too long. It says 13 minutes, hopefully I'll cut some. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Check out Above the Stars, and if it's available to wishlist, check out Mystro, which is this game. I don't know if it is, it's probably going to be a while. But yeah, thanks for watching and have a great day.